There's some reaction now. Former Cosatu unionist Dr. Ebrahim Harvey joins us for that. Dr. Harvey, good to have you, and thank you very much for your time tonight here on News at Prime. While the number of the unemployed in the country continues to increase and the salaries of those who manage to maintain their employment continue to drop, the ANC and the tripartite alliance continue to blame each other and spew out pessimism. Are they ever going to actually sit around the table and come up with a solution that will deal with the weaknesses in our labor market?
Yeah, thanks. Thank you for having me. Good evening to your viewers. No, for over 2 decades, and you can go and see the Mail and Guardian column that I had over 2 decades ago, the Cosatu and the SACP has been talking of a reconfiguration of the alliance precisely because the Cosatu in particular has been little more than convenient electoral cannon fodder from the 1990s already. 24 years, 5 years later, I can tell you I have really, frankly, little hope at all. And you must remember, we had little to celebrate. Human Rights Day just took place recently. And look at, Milka Cabral said, tell no lies, claim no easy victories. The ANC has not imbibed this at all. Grossly exaggerated. You listen to Ramaphosa's speech, Human Rights Day, then Freedom Day, and now Labor Day. Let me tell you, all 3 major days, very little to celebrate with human rights, very little to celebrate with Freedom Day, and very little. You're speaking of the biggest crisis facing the trade union movement in South Africa ever, and coinciding with the biggest crisis facing the global labor movement ever. It's far bigger than the crisis in capitalism. Capitalism is in the massive, unprecedented global capitalist crisis, but I can tell you labor and the trade unions are in a bigger even crisis. I don't believe that this reconfiguration, they've been singing and rehearsing the same thing for over 20 years. I really thought that, if you listen to Maipala since he came into office and replaced Brezimande, he's been speaking as if they were going to go for the SACP and support it in next year's election. I don't know if this. I have little hope in the reconfiguration of this alliance. It's been talked about for over 2 decades. Yeah. And let me tell you something else. I listened to the Harvey and them today. The one very big thing which is actually going to deepen the crisis in labor like you've never seen before, much bigger than the COVID impact and the Russian invasion, is this oncoming 4th industrial revolution. Let me tell you, when it really rolls over this country, what Harvey likes to talk about, a jobless bloodbath, is going to look like a Sunday picnic. Yeah. Motor manufacturing, robotics have taken over around the globe. It has not yet hit South Africa. And when it does hit, the trade unions I've not heard one labor unionist talking about Mayday.
Has government, though, mounted any solid response to this challenge? I mean, as you put it, one of the unique features of the labor market challenges facing South Africa is extremely high inactivity. It is high rates of unemployment and low levels of self-employment. Is there any sense that the government is able to respond to this, maybe via policy, for example?
No, they're not. And I mean, you must listen to Harvey and the trade unions. They speak a lot about that. And there's been little, let me tell you, that the ANC is in a far bigger crisis than the SACP is and Cosatu. Really, there is no way forward that has come from Ramaphosa and the ANC. And I'm afraid to say, labor market reform, you're dealing with the biggest cost of living crisis that has ever afflicted the working class. Inflation rates, interest rates combined is having a devastating impact, and this comes on the back of what happened with COVID and then the Russian invasion of Ukraine. People are struggling, over 12 million people unemployed, over 10 million people struggling to put food on the table, children going to bed hungry, malnutrition, you name it. Yeah. The working class is in the worst state ever. Let me tell you, and what is their biggest problem now? How can you have 3 union federations at NEDLAC? This is the thing. If there could have been unity of the trade union federations to respond to this crisis, this is the biggest failure.
What is threatening the unity and the democracy of unions?
Well, I think Mainly, you must remember that Cosatu is still the biggest labor federation in South Africa, much bigger than SAFTU, Harvey's federation. I think, I'll really tell you now, and I've written at length from the 1990s about it, my column of the Million, it is the pressure from the ANC. That is how Harvey, I don't want to go into this thing in detail. Harvey and NUMSA was kicked out of Cosatu, not because of Cosatu took that decision. No, Cosatu was pressurized to take that decision by certain people who I know and I don't want to talk about now in the upper hierarchy of the ANC and SACP itself. Let me not say more. Cosatu's decision to expel NUMSA and Harvey was not because a real, genuine decision by the rank and file. It was other pressures. And really, the trade unions today are in the worst crisis, really. I don't know, but I'll tell you, the one big step forward, if they could achieve that, and I think it's a long way off, is the unity of the existing labor federations, NACTU, FEDUSA, and Cosatu. And you can see they speak with different voices, even at NEDLAC, around COVID. The vaccines, for example, is one of the, different voices, so this is the big thing. If they could, achieve some unity in that regard, they'll be better placed to respond to the worst crisis that is.
Is there a silver bullet, though, you're saying, to that unity? Or, as you put it, they should actually begin to seriously take into consideration divorcing it themselves from the politics, especially if you're talking Cosatu from the ANC?
No, you're talking of two different things. If you talk NEDLAC, they need unity. They need unity crucially at NEDLAC. But in relation to the ANC alliance, I must tell you, I've given up hope long when I write about it all the time, I don't believe that this now that Maprela and others are speaking about reconfiguration of the alliance, go through the literature, go to the newspaper clippings that I can tell you now, from the 1990s late, after Gay they were speaking about the reconfiguration of the alliance post-Gay, Gay's 1996. They're still talking, like they're talking of the renewal from the 2002 Stellenbosch conference. The ANC's been talking about renewal. They're talking about this NDR, children dying in Pitrotines. Where's the NDR? We have the biggest socio-economic crisis ever. But I have little hope of a successful reconfiguration of the alliance. Cosatu's voice and needs and interests become of paramount importance. No,
what we do want to see, Dr. Harvey, are positive labor market outcomes. What policies do you think should be targeted now to improve that particular sector?
Well, let me tell you what I've been writing about at length. But you see, the ANC has even flouted its own recommendations, for example, regarding the South African Reserve Bank. One of the key pillars for employment creation, especially dealing with the worst unemployment crisis ever, was to have included in the mandate of the South African Reserve Bank job creation. Can you believe this? Ramaphosa, all of them till today, it's not. Was it? It would have served as a massive boost for job labor creation. They have a 2019 resolution at NASREC, now 2018, and they let it drop by the wayside. They've not fought yet. They have a resolution that the South African Reserve Bank must extend its mandate to include job creation. You're talking of labor market now matters. And they let the ball drop and nothing has happened, and Ramaphosa, in fact, he was the one to say that, there'll be difficulty around this thing. And 5-6 years later, it's still the same thing
Do you think there is a link, though, between social protection and the sustainability of employment? Because they're talking, for example, a minimum wage, which is something that many are saying could certainly be the driver that leads to employment in the country and more such, and whether conditions should be attached to that.
No, I'm a big advocate. I've written at length about the need for, this is what they should have done, this is a meagerly 350 Rand stress relief grant. And in the light of what's coming still with the fourth industrial revolution, when you're going to have massive millions of jobs lost, and don't think that the corporate a corporate sector is going to be protected. No. In fact, the thrust of the fourth industrial revolution is going to hit the white-collar corporate sector harder than it's going to hit other levels of... But you have hit the nail on the head, really. 1,500 rand is what a basic income as a minimum. Can you see the big difference between 350 now? Can you imagine how people are struggling? It would have been far better. And the ANCs, they've stolen. The cadres of the ANC have stolen over 2 million rand from the public fiscus. Why could they not have introduced a basic income grant that would have gone a long way to dealing with this devastating socio-economic crisis of hunger, poverty, etc.? And this is it. If the basic income grant could have been introduced, I'll tell you it would have been a massive, massive step forward to combat hunger and this worst cost of living crisis we have ever had, not only in post-apartheid South Africa, in the entire history since the 1910 Union of South Africa. We have never had. This is the worst cost of living crisis ever.
Former unionist there, and is Dr. Ebrahim Harvey, who is a commentator on some of the social, political, as well as labor issues.